Everything you feel is okay. It doesn't always feel that way. And they're absolutely right. Fine. Fine. Fine is the suckiest word. It never tells the truth. Not the full truth. Not the whole truth. Not all that we are. In the spirit of that truth, a story from me and my experience, friends. So, some years ago, I experienced what feels like one of the greatest losses of my life. Someone I loved very, very much, a partner of mine, was taken from this world far too soon and far too suddenly, and my little brain couldn't take it at the time. It must have been 25, so it's been almost 10 years now. Unable to sort of hold down work, I found myself staying with my mother in Rockwood, Tennessee, my hometown. Unable to be with my community, to be with people who I had shared experience with, other trans people, other people with a similar politic, a similar perspective on life. I felt very alone, and so I wound up caving into my own heart and into my own self. And this is the fruits of isolation. One morning I woke up and I looked in the mirror and I was disgusted with what I saw. Isolated, alone, my gender dysphoria, like burning like a fire, unable to actually afford my medication to help treat it. And so I fell off the deep end, friends, and made an attempt on my life, and I am saved by love. An idea, right? Like a seed. The idea, the passing thought, and it becomes magnified under our attention, and when there's nothing else to do and no one to share it with, what else do we do but ruminate and spiral on these things? A thought is a seed. We water it with our attention. And whether that seed is a tree of life that feeds the world, or just an idle fancy that goes nowhere, or a wicked vine that strangles us to the ground, depends on the seed, depends on where we're at when the seed arises. But we are not the seed. We are the ground. When I got to Peninsula, the mental health facility I was staying at, after my mother insisted, I called my therapist, and my therapist suggested inpatient treatment. Don't remember much of that time getting there, or the week of my time at Peninsula. I was in the back of a freezing cold cop car stuffed full of gabapentin, so I imagine I had every right not to remember. But I do remember one thing in particular, two things, I suppose. One was my friend Jay, who, the only friend of mine that came to see me. No shade on my other friends, they got busy lives, but he made the time to go all the way to Peninsula to play Battleship with me and talk about an escape plan from Roane County. A gift. Also stayed with him while I was on vacation. So ride or die, friends, right? We all need one. Whether we're young or old, we need somebody. We need other people. We're social animals. But Jay wasn't with me the entire time there. I didn't see a therapist but once, no medication. Didn't get a lot of help. I had a place to cool down, which was helpful. But the people that really stick out to me, well, there was this girl, golden-haired, skinny as a beanstalk, who, right when I came in, brought me a blanket and a pillow and hugged me and told me I was going to be okay and that she loved me. Not staff, another patient, another person, fellow traveler, denizen of that pine sol scented living hell. And I stayed there for a week, ate bad food, went to a support group, colored with people. There was another woman, an older woman from Vermont, who family, basically it was estranged from her, lost to her. We would color with markers and talk about our lives, and then she would try to convince me a log on the river was a FBI boat. Ups and downs, friends. But the simple presence of people who understand what it's like to be on the precipice, on the deep end, that was more healing than any drug they probably could have given me, any therapy they could have given me. The simple presence of another person who can listen, especially if they understand, but even if they can only listen without trying to fix. Well, we do love to fix, but listening. When I tell you how easily I come out of my skin, don't try to put me back in, just say, here we are. at the window, waiting for it all to get better, but knowing our hearts may have only skinned our knees, knowing this might not be the worst day, it might still be to come. Don't try to put me back in. Don't try to put others back in, right? I share that story with you largely to talk about the shame that can accompany such a thing. I've worked through this myself. I think this can be a story of healing, and it is no shameful thing to need help, to seek that kind of intervention, that kind of healing that can hold you and carry you through, if only for a time, just to get out of your house, to get out of your corner, turn around and see the world. While I was there, I thought to myself so many times, I don't belong here. There's people with really serious manic depressive issues, people with anorexia nervosa, people with real serious issues. What am I doing? And it can be really easy to make our own problems seem small compared to others, but sitting back here now, this was my dark night of the soul. A dark night of the soul. We often use that term colloquially to refer to a really bad time, and that's one way to use that term. But the term originates from a poem by St. John of the Cross, believe it or not. Beautiful poem. Kind of strange, if I'll actually spare it because we're running out of time, but essentially, the dark night of the soul for St. John of the Cross is similar to a lot of mystics in that it's less about, I'm in a bad place, but the ego disintegrates and reunifies with something bigger, reunifies with something more. Like how Paul on the road to Damascus was attacked by a shadow, changed his name from Saul to Paul and had a whole different life and was the man who wrote the words that those who do not love do not know God, for God is love indeed. Paul is a Christian mystic, so is St. John of the Cross. I do wonder how the medicalization of the mental health industry would have touched the mystics of this caliber if they were alive today. To be touched by something that undoes us can be terrifying, and no doubt we may need help. Perhaps that outreach is the potential for a reunification to something bigger, a reminder that we do indeed belong here. But we do belong here, that you can shake like a leaf on our family tree and know that you belong here, and that everything that you feel is okay. It doesn't feel that way all the time, but it is true, for we are known by our actions because we're not our thoughts. And while we are the boiling cauldron inside of us can make it seem like we are our feelings, but no. We're an observer, a perspective, a self, an agent in this world, a heart that does feel and does think. But we are not strictly speaking our thoughts or our feelings. We are bigger than those things. We contain them. Like a garden bed contains all these beautiful plants. Thanks, Larry. And all the people who work on our beautiful garden. But it is like that. The tomato plant is not the ground. It is in the ground. And if it isn't cared for, it doesn't grow. The ground of our being, friends, and the ground of our being together. And so I'll get to the quick of this. Compassion and mental health. I'll say first to our friends who would be better agents of compassion in this world, and I'll say it again, I've said it every week. Compassion is not the warm fuzzies. Compassion is the Latin prefix com, with, the suffix passion, from the pati, to suffer. The word intensities comes to mind, which is kind of relevant to our modern understanding of passion, intensities, but specifically the intensities of the suffering. So compassion is to be with the intensities of the suffering for others. Yes. We can do this in a number of ways. Dorothy shared a number of wonderful ways that we can be more present for each other. Call that community care. Because what people often need isn't just pastoral care, not from a church, it's community care. It's the weaving of our lives together into something real and righteous, something kind of old school. Churches have sometimes moved away from this, but this is how I grew up. Many of us grew up in churches. I invite you to reflect upon, if that was positive for you, what that was like. No matter what the theology was, no matter what the message was, what was the fellowship like? How did people care for one another? Was it sufficient or insufficient? Can we take what's good and then dream up something better? So friends, some 3 quick strategies. When I tell you how easily I come out of my skin, don't try to put me back in, just stay there by the window. Listen, remind, don't try to fix or save. I struggle with the term mental illness myself because in many ways there's nothing sick or wrong with somebody who is mentally ill. Now, sometimes there are disorders that manifest in ways that do require treatment and do require assistance and help. But often, these are just other ways of being. And it is no measure of poor health to be no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a sick society. Listening, deep, non-judgmental listening. Quiet the fire in your heart that wants to judge. Be present to the mystery of our neighbor. You may also ask if you can support in some way. I would not say, how can I help, or what would be helpful for you, because then in someone in crisis, you're putting extra work on them, right? You're saying, oh, take time to think about how I can help you. Instead, you might say something like, are there any errands that I can help you with? Would you like it if I brought you a covered dish in a disposable tray? Don't make them wash dishes. Simple things, friends, because love is made of simple stuff. Compassion, like to be with the intensities of the suffering, sounds all high and low and big, but it is. But it's also simple. It's the everyday stuff. It's the everyday magic. Someone asked me once if I was magic, which is cute. And maybe, but only if it's the everyday magic of compassion and kindness that I try to live into. And I hope you can practice that magic with me, friends. That magic of community care, mutual aid that this world is so missing so much of. As connected as we are, we know it's like a meme at this point. We are connected and yet broken apart. Here is our chance to play our hand in the healing of another heart, and in doing so, the healing of the world, because we do not know the broader implications of our actions. Try some kindness, some stillness, some listening, and some thoughtful asking about what a person might need. Now, if you are a person who has been institutionalized, if that has ever been a thing, if you've been at the precipice of despair, if you have a heavy heart, like Andrea said, I've never met a heavy heart that isn't a phone booth with a red cape inside. Some people just won't ever understand how hard it is for some people just to walk outside some days. Yeah, I know what this is like. I won't ask you to tell me if you know what this is like, but I imagine many of you do, or you might know somebody who does. You might know somebody who struggles in any number of ways. Mental health issues that come with aging or with time, mental health issues related to gender identity or sexual orientation, mental health issues that are just sort of part of our road and have always been with us. The trauma that can inform them, that can dig them up from the ground that is us. It can be really, really scary. And we can harbor a lot of shame around that. I think there is something natural to this, but that doesn't mean it's helpful. Evolution isn't some pie in the sky, ethical journey towards glory. Evolution, you kind of just get what you get. Shame is an evolved force. It led us to have more social cohesion as a species. It was useful at a time, I'm sure, but it's oh, if I hit Krog with this rock, I'm going to feel bad if I do that. Social cohesion, shame can be a force for this. However, we are not on the precipice of survival. We're living longer than 30, 40 years. I haven't ever killed a mammoth. Shame is still present in our species, in our animalness, in our meat, if you will. And it can still be useful as a political force, as a tool in the toolbox of social justice, perhaps, but shame in relationship to the ways in which the world tells us that we are broken, to the ways in which the world breaks us. No, friend. No. It's not needed. And you can lay that down. I invite you to extend that branch of compassion towards yourself and to remember that we're not here to be perfectly well adjusted to a broken world. We're not here to be perfectly well adjusted to a world that has used extractive industries to damage the world, to jeopardize the futures, to subjugate people, to push them to the side, to not center love. We're here for experience, friends. We're here for fellowship and for community. We're here to climb trees and eat fruit. We're primates. And like all other animals that are trapped in cages, do parrots not pull their feathers out? Does the orca not sigh dejected in a small tank? Do we, as animals, not live in various little cages of our own, all kinds of meta cages, cages of the heart, cages of the mind, the cage that can sometimes be the body? Perhaps we have trouble getting around. Perhaps our body doesn't feel like it fits us right. Perhaps there are also sometimes, for those of us who are incarcerated, cages around the cages that are our bodies. We are not purely free, friends. We are stuck in a way. How do we open the cage of our heart and let the parrot out? How do we touch that which is untouchable, which threatens to undo us? Perhaps sometimes it's okay to be undone. Perhaps sometimes things have to fall apart before they can come back together. I watched a dandelion lose its mind in the wind, and when it did, it scattered 1,000 seeds. Right. Maybe it's like that. Maybe our dark nights of the soul can be something more. Maybe there is within you that golden-haired girl thin as a beanstalk waiting to, perhaps in a manic drive, but still to give compassion and kindness to somebody who does not think that they deserve it. Perhaps it won't be returned. Perhaps that's still okay. Compassion is something we have to nurture and to build and to grow within ourselves, friends. So practice today. Practice today. If there's a friend you haven't called because it's been a little alienating, maybe try to make that call and see what happens. If there is something in your heart that's churning and burning and can't quite give it a name, well, say what hurts. What would I do if I were very sad and all I did was smile? I wonder after a while what would happen to my sadness or my anger if I sit there. Where would they go if I couldn't let them out? Maybe I would fall down or get sick or doubt. Yes, trauma unshared, trauma untreated manifests in physical ways. Don't let this happen to you. We're here to share in the raw stuff of living, these primate lives, these human lives, and you are worthy. Toe to tip, and there's nothing you can do to get rid of it. Toe to tip, suffused with that inherent worth and dignity. I can't tell you where it comes from, but I know that you have it. I know that I have it. We sometimes forget that that first principle applies to us as well. Honor that, friends. And may, after we move this month into the theme of transformation, we carry that fire of compassion alive within us, knowing that it is part of our mission to be authentic, compassionate, and transformative.